All right. Section 69 through 73. Let's do this. Context of 69. Go there with me. And tell your story. Let's drop it here. So, in November, concerning the publishing of the Book of Commandments, there were like several little mini conferences held at John Johnson's farm concerning how exactly we're going to publish this thing and get it out there. Voted how many copies to publish and abridge that. I think they started with how many was it? 10,000. They wanted 10,000 copies, and they brought it down to a more modest three. Section 70 is also relevant to this, to the publication of the Book of Commandments. So we'll talk about both of those here for a minute, and then we'll go to 71 and 73, which are juicy. But 69 pairs these two men together. So Oliver Cowdery was given the responsibility to take the pages, the actual Revelation manuscripts, from Hiram to Missouri. This is a long journey. And they've been doing some fundraising to, the saints have been sending in money, missionaries have been going out gathering money from the saints to take to Zion for the purposes of the printing as well as buying lands. Oliver Cowdery is also carrying all that money. So he's carrying both Revelations and a bunch of money, and he's supposed to go through this like wilderness area out into this Podunk village called, Independence. So the Lord says, you need a companion. You need someone big and scary, that if they met him in like a dark alley. So John Whitmer was the guy that was assigned right here in section 69 to be his companion. And so the Lord talks about that, bringing these two men together. Also, while he's got John Whitmer's attention, since we're talking to John Whitmer anyways, it might be time, John, for me to reiterate to you the importance of the history of the church that you are keeping, that you were called to keep back in section 47. So 47 and 69 are connected thematically. This expands John Whitmer's duties and reiterates them. Verse 3 tells him he should continue in writing and making a history of all the important things which he shall observe and know concerning my church. What should you write in your journal? The important things. What does that mean? Whatever you think it means. Verse 4, he should get counsel and assistance from Oliver Cowdery. Verse 5, this is interesting. My servants who are abroad in the earth should send forth the accounts of their stewardships to the land of Zion, Missouri. There should be a place kept in Missouri where, kind of like a storehouse of these accounts of the missionaries' journeys out into the world. It should be like a storehouse in Zion, a place to receive these things. John Whitmer, verse 7, is supposed to travel from place to place and from church to church to more easily obtain knowledge for the history of the church. He should also preach and expound and copy and select and obtain all things he can for the history of the church. So here is John Whitmer's history. We talked a little bit last time when we talked section 47. John Whitmer's history, which he was keeping, doing the best he could to follow this until he left the church. This turned into this 7-volume set, right? This turned into this building. Okay, so this is kind of how this worked. This building in Salt Lake is the repository that was envisioned here in section 69 that would be in Zion. When Missouri is no longer Zion per se, then when the saints go west, we're able to create different versions of this. But today, that's where the repository is. Did you know that if you would like to send in your missionary journals, they would be glad to have them in accordance with verse 5. Yeah, you can send in your missionary journals. Others in future generations may rise up and call you blessed for your ministry, to be able to see some of the cool things that happen in your missions. They would be interested in that, yeah.
No, when I was doing my dissertation on the church in Albania, that was like one of the main sources was the missionaries who had donated them. Really useful.
So it could actually be, helpful. You might want to black out a few pages or whatever you want to do. You might have some certain days that were frustrating. You might need to do a little editing of some Revelations. But very, very useful. In fact, if you really want to play with this, with my students, I like to say, hey, let's go check it out right now. There's actually resources on history.lds.org. You can go check out accounts of stewardship that have been sent in. You can go see if your ancestors have sent in anything. Go read their journals. So you just go to that website, click on the letter S, go to selected collections from the archives of the church, and then go to the very bottom of the page. And you click, I can't remember what's next. And you click on something at the bottom of the page, obviously, and that takes you to the archives. And you can look up people by name. It's really still archaic. We need people to like do a lot of indexing on it, because they'll have like pictures of like file cards, index cards with a name on it, which will then tell you which collection to go to with the name of your ancestor. Then you have to go to that collection, scroll down. You can't do a Control F because it's all just like pictures of old journals. So there's still a lot of indexing of that. That would be a super cool project for people to work on to make it more accessible so we can read this, because that's the point. Look at verse 8. What's the point of doing all of that? Why is all this effort worth it? Verse 8. Preach, expound, write, copy, select, obtain all these things which shall be for good of the church and for the rising generations that shall grow up on the land of Zion to possess it from generation to generation, forever and ever. Church history is meant to bless the rising generation. It's for the good of the church. We are currently living in church history right now. You are living in your future descendants' past. So this is kind of a way you can bless their lives is by leaving a record behind. So that's section 69, pretty cool. Now section 70, not disconnected with this idea of the publication of the Book of Commandments. This is where the Lord establishes the literary firm. We talked about that a little bit in connection with the law of consecration. Section 70, so here's the entire literary firm. Section 70 talks about how they're going to have different responsibilities. They're all named there in verse 1. And they are made stewards over the revelations which God has given. So this is what turns out to be their different roles. Joseph is receiver of revelation and chief editor. You got the funder. You got the helper who receives, reviews, and publishes. You got a transcriber, scriber, proofreader, printer, editor. So by editor, like we're talking editing the revelations, right? As we talked about, like he's going to go through them before they're published again and make some tweaks. We're going to say rod of nature, nah, about rod. There we go. Or thing of nature to rod, right? Then later in 1835, gift of Aaron, right? So he's going to make these editorial changes, those kinds of things. He's going to add things that he now understands about previous revelations that he didn't understand then, and help massage it all out. So that's all part of that. Later on, this is going to become a part of the United Firm, as we know. We'll talk more about that next time. More details on this. So there you go. But here's the cool things. Here's I think the main takeaways from section 70. Super cool. Those who are appointed to administer in temporal things for the church full time, he's talking about here, are allowed to receive payment from the church's consecrated funds to take care of their families. Now we actually already learned that in section 42. What he adds here, this is the important part, is those who are appointed to administer in spiritual things for the church full time are also allowed to receive payment from the church's consecrated funds to take care of their families. So this section 70 authorizes not only full-time general authorities who work, for temporal things like the bishop does in Zion, but also now this whole committee can have access. If they're full-time devoting themselves to this literary firm, they're not going to be able to be provided for their families, therefore they have access to the funds. This begins the beginning of church employees, right? Raise your hand if you've ever been paid by consecrated funds. This is that, right? Anyone who's ever worked for the church is justified by this revelation. There's this strange business about a lay ministry in the church. Sometimes we're accused of something we never claimed for ourselves. There is no revelation that says that those who are full-time servants of the Lord, in either case, temporal or spiritual, should not be paid. So sometimes it's a false test, But right here in the early, this is 1831, people, right? This is like still, the church is not even 2 years old, and we've justified paying people for full-time spiritual labor. So it's kind of a strange attack to attack us for, people, Mormon leaking, and President Eyring, he actually gets paid, and this is how much he gets paid, kind of things like. Doi. Yeah, like back in section 70, that was just like, this is part of the church. Like, now, bishops don't get paid in sacred funds because it's not what?
Full time.
Not full time. It's not full time. But this is where full time. However, if you're called to be a mission president, you can't fund yourself. Can you draw upon a stipend? Yes. There's a stipend for those kinds of things. And that's all justified here in Revelation. So there's nothing, no shenanigans going on with like paying people in church. That's like published in our Revelations fully, like, you know. Right here, yeah, Brian.
I got a friend that, this is perfect timing. 2 days ago, right? Yeah, Sunday, he just confessed to me that he's having some serious testimony issues ever since that Mormon Leaks thing. And I just sent him that picture of that slide, so hopefully that'll help.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps, right?
Yeah.
So, what about...
False assumptions lead us to faith crises.
Well, we are employees in that element, and we're getting paid by the consecrated funds, I guess, but not quite that way. Are they able to find and to obtain money in other ways?
Yeah.
Kind of like how we
In
are
fact,
able
as a
to
response,
They who?
obtain, meaning general authorities.
wasn't there some response to that leak that said that there are certain salaries that are only paid through the business ventures of the church and not through consecrated funds?
I don't remember all the details, but
So that sounds
That sounds
I guess
right.
I can't quote you, but it seemed like there was some sort of a statement that said like people like President Eyring are not paid through. You know what? I can't even quote it. So
gotcha. Maybe through the business ventures.
So I know
like
we
the-
can,
something
you know,
through
through other
city
business
credit
ventures, but I was wondering about the general authorities. Are they able to have other business ventures or their business beforehand to continue to make them money
think
in this
so.
process?
Yeah. Oh, they'll publish books, you know. They get paid for that. It's kind of literary firm-esque, right? They'll publish, Brother Bednar will publish a book, Israel book. Another
And
book,
that's
by the
for
way.
him?
He can
I
have-
thought that was,
He can have the funds if he wants. A lot of them will donate it to missionary fund or whatever, right? But
well, if Edward Bednar does it, doesn't it? It's, okay, never mind. Okay, cool.
yeah,
I'll just get that.
Still a private citizen in that way, right? Yeah, I don't think there's any, if you have a skill to Bednar, I don't know if there's a contractual like clause that says
Possible.
that you have to put these funds back into something that doesn't go to you. They could totally do that if they wanted. Yeah, we're kind of weird about money, huh, sometimes in church. Why? I really like that. I don't know. So from the foundation, that's not a problem. It's I don't know. Is Protestant Christianity getting in our heads? Is that what it is? So like, well, I guess that's not a good example, because their pastors get paid. Dang it, I don't know why. Why do we have priestcraft? Is that it? Are we worried about that?
So for me, it's because my whole life I was taught and taught
Yeah.
that we had no paid ministry. And that was in my missionary discussions that we memorized.
They have to
So-
be supported somehow. Like,
Exactly.
don't they
I
live?
totally agree.
Do they have
So I was
benefits?
always like, huh, well, but this totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't know how I missed it.
Yeah, there's false information about that, right? Yeah. Again, challenge for all of us, and we have, this is like humbling, but like, and I always catch myself, don't teach anything unless you can back it up with scripture. Right, this is hard to like, not just like forward things that have been forwarded to you and continue to promulgate that. Like, question and critique yourself as you're teaching this students. See if you can ground it in scripture. A lot of stuff like that falls out when you do that. Yeah, please.
So in this revelation or something surrounding it, like, do we see someone struggling with like that kind of concept? Like, oh, I want to be consecrated, but I feel
Torn to.
torn. Yeah. Is there something there that?
I don't think so. No, I think just right here at the beginning. At least I'm not aware of any like being torn among these brethren, because right in the Revelation, it's commanding them to unite and affirm. Is the salary, or not salary, but the justification. His words are, verse 15, for their benefit, for the reward of their diligence, for their security, for food, for raiment, for inheritance, for houses and lands, whatever circumstances that the Lord placed them in, that they'll have access to the funds for those things. I don't use the word salary or anything like that. So it's like built into the moment he's commanding them to unite. So I don't know if there was ever a time for them to be like, hey, wait, what? Whereas Edward Partridge, remember section 41 calls him, he has like 8 days to kind of stew. He's like, wait, the Lord says, quit your job, be a bishop. like 7 or 8 days goes by before Section 42 comes, and then he's like, oh, and I can have access to the funds of the church as a full-time general authority. Yeah, so, yeah.
Is the kind of message that the church videos have portrayed of Emma struggling with this, is that true? With accounts of that?
Struggling with this meaning?
Struggling with Joseph's constant reliance on other people making money? Never feeling like she had anything of her own, but rather they were always borrowing and receiving living off of the charity of the saints.
You said there's a church video depicting that? Is that
Like,
what it just says?
yeah, I feel like it's in church
It's not a
media.
church video, it's probably true.
Yeah.
No,
I feel like there's truth in that. I feel like I've read
I'm trying to remember.
something about that.
I was serious, like, there's probably good reason to think that.
We joke
Church
about a
is
church
probably-
video on another day,
Oh,
so that's
right.
why
Okay.
yeah.
I was like, yeah, we can, yeah.
Well, it was also in his mission lessons that church members didn't get paid anything ever, so.
Way back in section 24, verse 3, this is about the Colesville saints. When he's having the Colesville persecution, the Lord says to Joseph, magnify your office. After you've sowed your fields and secured them, go speedily to the church in Colesville, Fayette, and Manchester, and they shall support thee. And I will bless them both spiritually and temporally. But if they receive thee not, I will send upon them cursing instead of blessing. So support them. Section 43, go to 43. He does it in 43 again. He says to the saints, hey, he's talking financially here. Verse 12 and 13. If you desire the glories of the kingdom, appoint ye my servant Joseph Smith Jr., uphold him before me by the prayer of faith, to pray for him. And again I say unto you that if you desire the mysteries of the kingdom, provide for him food and raiment, and whatever thing he needeth to accomplish the work wherewith I have commanded him. If you do it not, he'll remain unto them that have received him, and you guys don't get him. So, like, let him be a prophet, and don't make, like, as Peter says, shall we wait tables? Or how does he say that? It's like, we don't need to be waiters of tables in the book of Acts. I'm misquoting that, but he's like, come on, let's appoint other men to do the temporal stuff when we get up there. We don't need to do things that for our, like money-making ventures. Let's just go out and preach. And that was in the context of them having all things common in the book of Acts. And so potentially they had something similar said. Who knows? But anyway, so from section 24 we see there's this gentle encouragement to provide physical beings for Joseph, and now it's expanded to all those who are called to full-time work. Okay, section 72, let's go. Section 72 is the calling of the second bishop of the church. Joseph goes back to Kirtland from, where was he in 69? From Hiram. Goes back to Kirtland in 72. Meets with Newell K. Whitney. See back in section 68, verse 14. The Lord said other bishops are about to be set apart under the church to minister even according to the first, meaning Edward Partridge. So there's kind of an allusion to this. Then 4 sections later, we have now our second bishop, and he's given specific instructions about bishoping, stewardship, getting people to, kind of watching over the storehouse, things that we've seen in section 42. Also to give Zion recommends, that's there at the end of section 72. In verse 24, 25, 26, talks about a certificate to go to Zion, so it's starting to become more official that you need one of those. And he'll be the one over in Kirtland that authorizes people to go to Zion, Missouri. So that's all I want to say about section 72. All right. Now this is super fun, super interesting stuff. 71 and 73. Joseph and Sidney are called to confound their enemies. Shoot. Here we go. We're going to have a little showdown right now, right here. Our very first anti-Mormon, like official anti-Mormon, has emerged. Well, at least the first one to publish anti-Mormon literature. What's his name?
Ezra Booth.
That's right, Ezra Booth. Ezra Booth. So here's, during this time, all these purple dots. These are all articles that Ezra Booth has published. So there's a series of, 9 different articles that are published. So section 71 comes after 7 of those have been written. They're like letters that he's written and then published in local newspaper. And section 71, Joseph and Sidney have been doing Joseph Smith translation stuff. And in the midst of this, the Lord says, okay, it's time. Stop translating and get out there, open your mouths, proclaim the gospel, and confound your enemies. And so let's kind of watch what happens, what unfolds here. Section 73 is going to tell them, okay, stop, that's good enough. That's good. If you look at the commands, they're pretty blunt, verse 7 and 8. Wherefore, confound your enemies, call upon them to meet you, both in public and in private. So it's not just Ezra Booth, who else is his sidekick, his henchman? It's Ezra and
Joseph, Sidney.
Simon's Rider, yeah, those are the two. So, yeah, Joseph and Sidney are to go and take on Ezra and Simon's Rider. Both of those guys were, well, Ezra's a Methodist preacher, and Simon's Rider is a Campbellite preacher, a disciple. And so he says, call upon them to meet you in public and in private, inasmuch as you are faithful, their shame shall be made manifest. Wherefore let them bring forth their strong reasons against the Lord. Let's hear what they have to say. You go, you confound them. So they did. In fact, Sidney Rigdon publishes. Yeah, just go read all this stuff. This is really good. He publishes in the newspaper. Let me show you. Okay, somewhere. Let's go right here. So if you go to the background context of this section, let's go 71, and I actually have Ezra Booth's letters. It's the only anti-Mormon material I have on my website, but here's all the letters that he wrote. They're pretty intense. They make you feel gross inside.
What's like the gist of them? And what's
Joseph's not a prophet.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. He's kind of making this up. I've been with him in close quarters. I've watched him. Kind of has a temper. He's quite dictatorial. Yeah, he pretends. He uses revelations conveniently to get him out of, situations where he's in a bind. That kind of stuff. So, Sidney Rigdon's public invitations to debate. This is awesome. So he writes these this is the exact aftermath of verse 7 and 8. He publishes this on 15th of December. What's the date on section 71?
December 1st.
December 1st, okay. 2 weeks later. To the public, he publishes in the Ohio Star. Can you read that? Not really.
Yeah, kind of.
The Lord willing, I will deliver a lecture on the Christian religion in the village of Ravenna on Sunday 25th, Christmas, the Brick Schoolhouse. I give notice to Ezra Booth, calling you out, brother, that his attendance is desired, as I shall review the letters written by him and published in the Ohio Star headed Mormonism, as those letters are an unfair and false representation of the subjects on which they treat. Should it not be convenient to review them on Sunday, I shall review them the day following. If a place can be provided for that purpose by the citizens of Ravenna, or any time or place where it may be the most convenient for all concerned, Sidney Rigdon. And then to Simon's Rider, look how he spelled his name. Sir, as you have publicly declared the Book of Mormon to be an imposition, and I believing it to be otherwise, at present deeming it my privilege to note as well as you, do hereby present a request to you to meet me in the township of Hiram, Portage County, at such time and place as may be agreed upon hereafter, to investigate this subject before the public, that if I am deluded in receiving the book as a revelation from God, I may be corrected, and the public relieved from anxiety. Your acceptance or rejection of this request is desired through the medium of the Ohio Star. Now, to that, check this out. Close some stuff. So, Eber D. Howe, who published in that area, the Painesville Telegraph, he says this, right after that came out, he's like, shoot, he says, Sidney Rigdon, the vice regent and champion of Joe Smith, has thrown out a challenge on the Ohio Star to Mr. Booth and Deacon Ryder, who have renounced the Mormon faith, to meet him in mortal combat of words on the subject of the Golden Bible. So he's like, let's do this. So it's like the Lord saying, okay, get out there. So is that okay? Is this okay?
Yeah.
Is this okay to defend the faith like this? Is this throw down for the Lord? Or we're supposed to avoid contention, and we don't Bible bash, we don't do that, so that's not what we do.
This is Bible bashing. This is Book of Mormon bashing.
Oh shoot, so all things are now
Off the table.
Legal, authorized, yeah. What happens? Do you know what happens?
No, we didn't even know this was a thing.
Oh, it's a thing. It is a thing. In fact, maybe a little prophetic help here. So Elder Maxwell loves this quote from Austin Farrar about C.S. Lewis. You know this one? Like, argument's good. Like, listen to the prophet say, like, you should argue. You should, like, defend, right? There's obviously principles that should guide that. Shouldn't be certain. Shouldn't look a certain way, but it's okay to look another way. What no one shows the ability to defend is quickly abandoned by others, right? Rational argument does not create belief, but it maintains a climate in which belief may flourish. We can and we should be articulate believers, right? Our incapacity for defending the faith can turn men into persecutors. If you can't defend it, people won't leave. Here's another one, President Monson. We will almost certainly be called upon to defend that which we believe. Will we have the courage to do so? Another one. There will be occasions in each of our lives when we will be called upon to explain or defend our beliefs. When the time for performance arrives, the time for preparation is past. Another one, Elder Holland. I love this one. This was at Religious Studies Center's dinner. I was talking to a group of BYU professors. It was awesome. He says, hey, we've always been at war with the adversary in our effort to win the hearts of men and women, but now more and more, partly because of technological access, we must be vigilant in the battle for the minds of the human family. We've got to learn to like battle well for their brains, right? And that takes rational argument. That takes some of what Elder Maxwell is talking about. Elder Christofferson. We need strong Christians who can make important things happen by their faith and who can defend the truth of Jesus Christ against moral relativism, militant atheism. Even President Packer willingly defend the history of the church. Don't be ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Are we authorized? Everyone feeling good? Okay. Did you have a comment, Daniel?
No.
Okay. There's another one. Parents, have the courage to defend the truth and bear powerful testimony. The moral issues of our day must be addressed in your family. If you can start there, start in your family. So let's go back to the history. What happened? What happened? Yeah, let's go. Just gotta go read this. It's really good. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but here's what happens. They don't show up. Ezra Booth nor Simon's Ryder, neither of them show up. And so Sidney Rigdon makes it known to the public on January 12th. He's like, hey, a few weeks ago I invited Simon's Ryder to meet me and investigate the divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon, with which he pretended to have an intimate acquaintance, and which he pronounced an imposition. Willing to acknowledge every man to be honest and sincere till I have evidence to the contrary, so I was willing to receive Simon's Ryder in the character which he claimed. But how far myself or the public are bound to receive him as an honest man, I leave his letter written in reply to my request to testify. If Simon's Ryder is afraid to have his assertions put to the test, why make them? That's good. That's good right there. Why make them? If he is certain, as he pretends, that the Book of Mormon is a base imposition, why be afraid to come forward and prove it? I say, where is honesty? Where is candor? Surely not in the heart of such a man. Might have be blamed for drawing such a conclusion. Surely not. He's forced it upon him. Anyway, let's skip down here. He who is afraid to have his assertions put to the test, let him cease to make them. Whoosh. He who does not defend his charges gratuitously made against his neighbor's religion when called upon will do well to set himself down in his own house and tell the people, if you'll bring your preaching to my house, I'll do it for you. I will investigate privately, but do not bring me before the public. So is Simon's conduct. And there I leave him for the present. So that's... that's good.
Look, I was watching Hamilton right here.
So that was January
Hamilton, just
12th.
right.
Go to section 73. Look at, what's the date on section 73? January what?
10.
10th. So, in section 73, the Lord says, okay, that's good. Point's been made. Get back to preaching the gospel in verse 3. Get back to translating again soon, after the next conference that we hold. Okay. So 73 basically stops what 71 started, as far as that goes. Hey, what resources do we have to become articulate believers, articulate defenders of the faith? I like to try to equip my students with a few little tools. How are you going to know? Sometimes some people's testimony may depend upon your ability to defend the faith. Where are you going to go to learn your faith in such a way that you can defend it confidently?
ScottWoodward.org.
That's the correct answer. ScottWoodward.org. I told them they could go here and read the letters and stuff, but I have this little link called Defending the Faith, and when you click on Defending the Faith, you actually see like all like the hot button issues. I'm just taking it from all over the place. LDS.org, fairmormon.org, Interpreter Foundation. Many times they have super good articles about all the issues: Book of Abraham, polygamy, blacks the priesthood, masonry, temple ritual, like anything. I just try to aggregate it all there. So if someone has an issue, go read up on it. A little learning's a dangerous thing, but if you learn a lot about it, you'll see the nuances of the issue. You realize that's not a huge stumbling block to your faith. Like, go for it. Like, dig deep and then be prepared to defend. The people who know the most about these issues, my experience has been, tend more often than not to be the faithful ones. And those who know something about the issues but not the full issues oftentimes tend to be the antagonists. Right? Not always the case, but often the case. Look at verse 10, back to section 71, actually 9 and 10. This is what I like to just share. The takeaway from section 71. I think this is important in our technological age. As Elder Holland talked about it. I think 9 and 10 are important promises for us to remember in an age of anti-Mormonism, anti-theism even. The Lord says, "Verily thus saith the Lord unto you, there is no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper. If any man shall lift his voice against you, he shall be confounded in mine own due time." In mine own due time. And in course of time, seriously, I think the anti-Mormon attacks against Joseph and the Book of Mormon and the church and all that, they've been answered super, super well. Not all of them are slam dunk answers, but there's enough to like keep the wolves at bay, right? Long enough to seriously and honestly investigate the truth. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Ultimately, in time, the Lord will confound all of his enemies. So I love that. I hope we will be fearless in our defense of the faith. I think I've heard all the anti-Mormon attacks. Do you guys feel like you've heard all the anti-Mormon attacks? I feel like I've heard them all. I haven't heard a new one in a long time. By the way, what's your favorite source of anti-Mormon material? I really like Fair Mormon, because it's like, here's the anti-attack, and then like, here's a faithful response right by it. So you don't have to like go through that agonizing, oh shoot, what's the answer? You go, and then you go to the answer right there. It's like, okay. I mean, that's a good source to like get yourself acclimated if you want to. But I think, I don't know, there's so many attacks against the church, but gosh, I haven't heard a really good one. I've heard some that like stumped me for a while, and then find out the answer. It's like, gosh, you know what I mean. But like, we don't have to be afraid of that kind of stuff. It's dark, like I said. Reading Ezra Booth's slamming Joseph over and over again. That's not like edifying. So I don't like recommend you do it for a long time. But it's there's nothing ultimately to be afraid of with that. So I had a student once who came to me at BYU, and he's like, we were going in church history. We were talking about the Kirtland apostasy, which we'll talk about next 2 times from now. Anyway, he's like, hey, that was really good. Came up afterwards, like, that was good. It's like I set down my notepad and I just like listened. And I started thinking about my grandpa who left the church because of church history issues. And he said, honestly, I'm afraid to study church history because I don't want to be like my grandpa. I don't want to leave the church. So if I would know something that would cause me to leave the church, then I don't want to know it. But as you're teaching this, it's actually super interesting to me, and I want to know it, but I don't want to know it, you know? And he's like, so like, what do I do? And I like Richard Turley's response, where he says, our problem is not knowing church history. Our problem is what? Not knowing enough church history. Just keep reading. Read more deeply. Read more broadly. Get more context. And your assumptions may be challenged. Like, hopefully we've challenged some as we've gone along through Doctrine and Covenants, just reading this way. Sometimes it challenges some of our assumptions. That's good. Just be flexible, be pliable, and allow yourself to learn what prophets of God really are. Learn how God really deals with his children as you kind of just work through the history and work through the revelations. I find it refreshing and faith promoting, ultimately testimony strengthening. Become more resilient and not so susceptible to anti-Mormon attacks. So, anyway, I love those promises. Anyone who lifts their voice will eventually be confounded. I think we're well into the fulfillment of that. Okay, that's the end of those sections.